When someone tells you cross that bridge when you get there, there's a lot of things that come up emotionally, right? There's a lot of anxiety around wanting to know right now the circumstances of the future. And I think a lot of it comes down to our need to control, and more so, it's our relationship with discomfort and our relationship with fear. Because what we're looking to do is we're trying to get ahead of the curve. Even if we consider ourselves self aware, even if we consider ourselves emotionally intelligent, we're trying to get ahead of the lessons of life instead of embodying the human nature that is being imperfect and having a bit of humility in regards to, we don't know and we're going to make mistakes. And we have to acknowledge that because there's part of us, and it's the part of us that feels anxious. It's that we want to be at the final destination already. We want to have the happy ending already. But there's never going to be that complete and utter whole happy ending. And we find more wholeness, we find more fulfillment, I think, in rather looking to find happiness in what already exists in front of us and seeing that it doesn't need to be complete. It doesn't need to be aesthetically whole for it to still be enjoyable in the moment. So, cross that bridge when you get there is one of those advices that is so stupidly simple, but it's actually what our emotional triggers reveal to us as a result of hearing something like that and being advised in that sort of way. Because it is true, we do have to cross certain bridges when we get there. And a lot of times, why we feel so much anxiety and why we feel so out of control is because we don't trust ourselves to make the right choices in the moment. And we don't want to feel trapped. We don't want to feel stuck in something that we didn't choose. But that gives a lot of power outside of us instead of recognizing that, you know, most circumstances, most situations, no matter what they are, we do have the choice of acting in a different way, pursuing a different state of being in which will unlock, either staying where we are and what we're enjoying or moving on to something else. We're often far less trapped than we would like to believe. And that crossing that bridge, it's not that scary. And you could turn back if what's on the other side is not applicable to what you're looking for. You can always turn back. Just because you cross the bridge doesn't mean the bridge disappears when you're already on the other side. And I think that's what we fear from these sort of movements in life. And that's why we a lot of times find ourselves more stagnant than anything else. And it's because we're not willing to accept that crossing the bridge doesn't solidify many of our choices. And let me break down this metaphor, I guess, more practically. And that is, starting a new job isn't the end of the end. Of course, if you look at it from a very short sighted perspective, that starting a new job or new school or whatever it may be, a new environment, whatever it may be, it might be, you know, it may feel like that's the final decision, but you might not find yourself feeling very fulfilled in whatever choice you made, and you might end up not even backtracking, but maybe doing something else, moving somewhere else. It doesn't really matter, but what does matter is the fact that you can turn around once you're on that other side of the bridge. Our mind likes to be very blinded to temporary decision making and temporary choices because emotionally they feel like a final investment. When you start something new, the reason there's so much pressure, there's so much weight, is because you want it to be that thing. If it's your job, you want it to be your favorite and best and most fulfilling job. If it's a place, you want it to be your best, favorite place that you were meant to be. If it's any sort of relationship, you want it to be that. And it's okay if it's not. And it's still worth experiencing, even if it's not. Even if it's not everything you've been looking for, it's still worth experiencing. We can't shut down all of the little avenues in life, all of the little side quests, because we keep waiting on that big thing. But that big thing may come as a result of two things. Number one, it may come as a result of whatever side quests, whatever different things you engage yourself with. Or number two, whatever you encounter and whatever becomes of you, your personality and the structural system of who you are, that will influence the way that you move through life. And in turn, that will move you towards that thing that you've been looking for this whole time. And maybe if we can be really open minded, we can see that whatever we're judging right now, maybe it's far more fulfilling than we would have originally given it credit for. And maybe our judgments were very surface level and, things are deeper than how they appear upon first glance. Something I've noticed is that the game of life rewards experience more than anything else. You're better off making mistakes and experiencing them through people, through situations, through environments, rather than always making those decisions in your head and never actually understanding what would have become of them. In experiencing life, in experiencing different people, in experiencing, and I mean that, conversationally, career-wise, whatever that may be, in experiencing different situations, different environments, whatever our heart entails, by experiencing the sort of diverse nature of life, we become a version of ourselves that I guess was forged in the fire of life. And we are rewarded for this expansion. We are rewarded for this expansion because now we are much more equipped to handle and carry the weight of the thing that we've been looking for. And maybe the thing that we've been looking for truly, in its essence, in its sort of emotional energy and fulfillment center, the thing that we've been looking for has always required us to go through these other little side streets to actually become the person that we needed to become to handle, that thing that we've been waiting for. I know that may have run in circles a little bit, but I think you guys understand what I'm trying to say. I think the biggest sort of thing that's happening realistically is that we're looking to forego the mistakes and we're looking to more so forego the discomfort that is experienced in making those mistakes. But once we radically accept that making those mistakes are not only okay, but they're not going to be as emotionally, you know, dramatic and cause as much emotional turmoil as our mind is convincing us to believe, then we can start to make peace with it. And even so, maybe we can actually lean into it even more. Because if we start to understand that life, reality, in a way rewards those who experience more and who can learn from their experiences, then more than anything else, we can actually lean into this in a sort of childlike way to experiencing presence in those moments. So even if we know there's a possibility that I'm in unknown territory and I'm not going to be able to navigate this properly, but we still feel compelled to experience it. There's something in our heart saying, I want to experience more. I want to experience more. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we confuse the wanting to experience more with various attachments. I think feeding the very nature of consciousness is allowing ourselves to be present enough, is allowing ourselves to be void of all the defense mechanisms we've created around anxiety and fear, and allowing ourselves to experience life with a present mind and a heart that is trailblazing its way through life. And in this way, two things happen. The mind becomes expanded, the mind becomes better adjusted to handling a variety of situations and a variety of environments and people, and the heart eventually meets its very end because it allows itself to experience itself freely without the mind getting in the way. I know I just threw kind of a lot into that one sentence, so I'll break this down, in a clear way that even I think can resonate with even more. And that is, there's two factors here, the way I look at it. There's the heart, which I see as consciousness, and it's looking to experience the most that it can out of life. And this comes from, I guess, the spiritual perspective that we're drawing upon, and that is, whatever you want to call it, universe, reality, whatever you want to call it, is experiencing itself through all of us. So why wouldn't that force of consciousness, why wouldn't that want to experience itself through us? And I think we can feel this as well. When there's something we really want to do, we could feel it in our heart. And this has nothing to do with survival. We can only really experience these things when the needs of survival have already been met. When the needs of survival have already been met, what is left but the navigation and expression of the quote unquote soul? When there's room for us to explore, when we have food, when we have water, when we have our survival needs met, I think it would be an injustice to not allow ourselves to experience that at large. Practically looking at it, actually, before I dive into that point, I'll dive into quickly what's going on in the mind. And what's going on in the mind is as you expose the mind to a variety of situations, to a variety of people, variety of environments, and it's constantly having to adapt, this actually helps the mind because the mind is in its natural state when it's being challenged, when it's being forced to sort of find new ways to helping you. When the mind is constantly experiencing the same day over and over, it starts to not deteriorate, but it's not the most healthy for it because it's not being challenged. It's not being asked of anything new. And so it kind of starts to shut itself down and slow itself down in a weird way. You can actually do a quick Google search on this. I mean, this is a pretty well-known phenomena that, when we're living the same day over and over, this causes the brain to not function as properly as when it's constantly being asked new challenges. And relatively, I think this falls into the lane of challenged in a way that is not stressful, but more creative. But in any case, that's what's going on in the mind. And as well, if we do need to develop that mindfulness practice to create that space, like I always say, we do need to do that first. Because if you're constantly thinking about the bridge and you can't help but thinking about the bridge, then you need to detach from the voice in your mind that is constantly bringing up the bridge at large. When your mind says, what will happen when you cross that bridge? Don't look to solve and don't look to answer that question from the mind. That's a question that isn't meant to be answered. It's a question that's meant to be experienced. The answer is the experience. When you're experiencing life, you walk with much more wisdom and not knowledge wisdom, the type of wisdom that we find from watching videos and reading books, but the actual wisdom that comes from experiencing life. There's a different confidence, there's a different charisma and presence in those that are forced to live life on a daily basis rather than constantly ponder and think about the very nature of life constantly. If you think all the time, you will have an entire experiential tolerance to life only in the form of thought. Your confidence will be very easy to shake. Your charisma will be very easy to kind of break. And more than anything, your presence and your peace of mind is going to be very dependent on the comfort of your home, of your room, of your bed, whatever it may be. What we want is to embody all of these qualities everywhere. And this is why people give up. They don't think this is possible. But of course it's possible. It's a regulated nervous system and it's a relationship and system based mind, which is not dependent on comfort constantly, where we're not constantly retreating into isolation, where our relationship with discomfort is not that we're trying to avoid it at every angle. And this is the most powerful practice I think I've ever implemented in my life. Maybe not ever, but maybe it's definitely top three. And that is, instead of at every turn when something is uncomfortable and something forces you to feel discomfort, instead of the natural impulse that you have to avoid it, accept it. Actually, accept it as a challenge and say, any area of my life that is causing me discomfort, that is making me uncomfortable. Obviously, this is within reason. We have to use logic here. I see these as opportunities for me to become much more confident, much more resilient, and much more present. So instead of jumping ahead and trying to map out every little area of our future to sort of avoid discomfort and try to avoid making mistakes we've made in the past, why don't we instead change our entire relationship with discomfort as a whole? So we say, even if the thing that I'm worried about going wrong goes not right, I can see that as even an opportunity for growth. That in those mistakes, in the learned experiences, I become more confident. I become more empowered. I find it easier to be present in various stressful environments and circumstances because I have experienced these types of things before. I don't think that the key to life is trying to always plan ahead and move through life in a way where we're plotting instead of constantly experiencing. In my book, I talk about this where there's a difference between the thinker and the experiencer. And the thinker will grow frustrated and miserable eventually because all they're left with is imagined situations that are in turn backed by imaginary confidence, imaginary actions, and imaginary experience. Whereas the experiencer will have real confidence backed by past experiences. They will have real presence and tolerance for experiencing the present moment because of their experiences in the past. It's not that we're constantly attaching to the past to give worth to our present self. But we cannot ignore that, our brain, it works in a certain way. And more than anything else, the experiences of our life will confirm the belief systems that we have. So our capableness, our confidence, our empowered self is not only the result of our self-perception, but rather how comfortable can we be with going against the grain and crossing that bridge even when we have no idea what's on the other side? How open can we be? Can we keep an open mind? Can we keep an open heart? Because to the degree that we can be open is to the degree that we can experience multiple paths all at once. I like to reference that there's, a way that you can go about life where you're living very, I guess, narrowly, you're very strictly, you're only really ever experiencing life in a singular, rigid pathway. So, there's this school, and then that job, and then that relationship, and then, that goal, and then that achievement, and then that switch up and that change. There's always a very predictable, stationary, set path. And if anything strays along that path, that someone may see those experiences as not as worthy as experiencing the typical fashion of what they would imagine their path to be. But if you keep an open mind, if you keep an open heart, especially if you are the kind of person that considers yourself, you know, interested in the deeper facet of awareness and the deeper orchestration that is life and how it unfolds and how the events, synchronicities, and all these things unfold. If you look at it from that perspective and you keep an open mind, you keep an open heart, you open yourself up to every pathway. Now, all of a sudden, you are significantly more free because you are not confining yourself to an aesthetic pathway. What I mean by that is you're not depending on all the circumstances of your life to look a certain way for them to be valuable and for them to be worthy of experiencing. And this non-judgmental state is treated very well by reality, by the universe, because all of a sudden opportunities are everywhere. And they were already there to begin with. But all you had to do was open your mind, and more so, open your heart and be willing to be there and experience it. Not always, in our home or not always on our phone, kind of tucked away, not willing to experience the abrasiveness that is reality, that is life. And what is this going to take? It's going to take us accepting that a well-lived, happy, peaceful, satisfied life holds many areas of it in which will trigger and force us to feel discomfort. We're going to have to feel uncomfortable. We're going to have to feel uneasy, anxious, and we're just going to have to sit through it. We're going to have to grow our tolerance to it. And actually, if we lend our hand in that direction, if we choose to experience more from life and in turn experience more discomfort, it's going to make us extremely more comfortable and present in the more normal, quote unquote, mundane circumstances of life. It's like if you go to a foreign country and you lose your phone and you're forced to figure it out, and then you come home and you have all of this accessibility, perspective wise, you're going to feel much more confident and much more at peace. I'm not saying we have to do that, but this is just a general example of how our brain creates self-perception through the experiences that we live. So stop trying to jump ahead. Stop trying to use your wisdom to forego the very human nature of making mistakes. Your wisdom is meant to keep you open. Wisdom, more than anything else, is meant to keep us open to the fact that we can be wrong. And in being wrong, there is so much value. There's so much to be experienced in being wrong. And of course, it's okay to be wrong. When we embody this level of humility, we also embody a level of confidence in it. Humility doesn't mean we throw our empowered self out the window. It truly means we own it, but we stay in a very open state. That's it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Oh yeah, I'll leave my book link in the description. It's also available on Amazon. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you as always, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.